All right, welcome back to Blue by 90. I'm Justin, joined by Tanner, and we've got another special guest today. Last time we had 247 Sports on. Now we've got On3, so we're butting the
and we had rivals,
and we did have rivals. Yeah,
we're just
we're making our rounds. But we've got Clayton Safie on. Clayton, good to have you again. One of our good friends of the pod. So appreciate you coming on, man.
Great to be here. Last time I saw you, you were running an entire golf outing, or at least with your wife. So it's good to see you in a more informal setting, a little less stressed out. So
a little less stressed out. I'm not trying to wrangle 100 football players to try and not like run people over with our golf carts. And like when we have millionaire donors there. So yeah. So I'm a little less stressed currently, but no, it's good to see you. I mean, we've been talking about it. I feel like we lead off every single pod like this, but like we're just so ready for football season. I think we've said this on every single pod for the last 3 too, but like the weather is turning, and so it just feels. I was like, the other day yesterday. I was right around the big house. Like I was doing some stuff there, and it was just like this fall, windy, like crisp feeling, and the flags were flying, and I was just like, holy shit.
The banners are hung.
The banners are up. They look unbelievable. I like the black. I'm not going to lie. The black looks so good.
Yeah, it's nice. Like the college football playoff is black and gold, so like it fits.
It does. It looks beautiful. It's never coming down either, fellas. It's never coming down. Well, I don't know if that's true, but maybe for the whole year, they'll have them up. Justin, you may know.
Well, I mean, hypothetically, it's never coming down. You know, like it is,
like the meaning
of what it.
The physical banners may be replaced. Maybe who knows?
I don't know. Playoff? I don't know if they have a plan for if they're only up for a year or if they move them to somewhere. I would like, though, I've seen some chatter on Twitter out there. I don't know about you guys. Would love to hear your thoughts. I would like if we started putting this, whether it be on the press boxes, the Big Ten championships, the national championships, or on the sides of the scoreboards. Like, there's got to be something, right? Like,
do it like Nebraska's.
A lot.
Do it like Nebraska's. Add some spice to the blue in the press box area. I'm certainly down for that.
I like it, and maybe they will have to take it down when they win another this year potentially. I'm just trying to pander to the audience here, but it's I think it looks great, and it's well deserved, obviously, with this sort of accomplishment. But I agree. I mean, you win the Big Ten and you do all those sorts of things. You should put something up for that too. And but the Big House also has that kind of classic look to it, even with the new modern big buildings on the side. So it looks pretty good.
I think you could do something like either like metallic or like silver. It doesn't have to be like crazy, or even just like a matte. Like it's almost like a matte navy that you can kind of see, but it doesn't, do much. I think to your point, there needs to be some recognition of these teams that have done such unbelievable things. But yeah, I mean, listen, we are going back to back, which the haters are furious about it. So
I've talked myself into it. Like
I literally was on the phone with somebody today, and like here's where my conversation. Tell me if you guys are similar to this, but my conversations usually with somebody that I know is a crazy Michigan fan, just like me, and it'll start with like, yeah, so how's it going? And then like 30 seconds in, it's like, so what do you think about the team this year? And then it just like completely pivots, and then you go a half hour just talking about the team.
100%. That's exactly how we're doing it right now.
We literally are doing it.
You're like 3 minutes in, and you're like, Cole Sullivan is so underrated. He's going to be a monster. Like you just get into like true freshmen, like look out for Jaden Hood this year, Jimmy Rolder, like guys that aren't as known throughout the country, but like we know is like, yeah, dude, look out for Trey Pierce, redshirt freshman, put on some weight in the also. Like you just get into the depths of Michigan football, and I love that. And Clayton, I want to ask you, man, being around Shem. The best chance for Michigan to repeat is that defense, man. And we've heard, I mean, everybody we've talked to is like, yeah, this defense might be better. Like, that's what they're hearing from inside the building. Like, are you hearing that too? Because while it's hard to believe because of how good last year's was, like, the star power, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore, Will Johnson, Jason Barham, Ernest House. Like it just seems like this starting 11 might be the best defense Michigan has had in a very long time.
Yeah, I think the starting 11 might have a chance. I think the depth, it's going to be hard to ever find a team, especially a Michigan team with that much depth on one side of the ball and really just the whole roster in general. But if they can replace Rod Moore, who went down with the injury, and Mikey Sainer still in the back end, I think those are the two keys, because I really love the D line. As good as Junior Colson and Michael Barrett were, the linebackers might be even better, question mark. With you hear great things about
that's a crazy, like if you would have told me that in January, I would have been like, you're insane, right? Like Junior Colson is one of the better linebackers to come through this football program in the last 2 decades.
100%. And then you're hearing stuff about Jayshawn Barham, who it was at that golf outing that Justin, you organized there, where Rod Moore was talking to us, and he's like, dude, I can't even, like, he stopped talking about Jayshawn because he was like, I can't even describe to you like the things he's doing, but you just have to see it. It's like, well, damn, I have to wait till August 31st. You guys get to watch him at practice. And then you hear, as our Chris Ballas reported over on the Wolverine.com, that, they had to pull him out of a drill because he was hitting too hard. Those are the things you want to hear. And it sounds like more of the same, type of Michigan program that it's been for the last 3 years, really, to a similar extent the last 9. So, I mean, it's always started on the defense, right? I mean, even with Jim Harbaugh, he comes in and you expect a former quarterback in the NFL and at Michigan to be, but he's not Sean McVay. You expect him to be a little more offensive centric, but he's always had good defenses. That's been the identity, and I feel like that's going to be the same thing here.
I mean, I've heard this, like, with regards to, is Barham, it's not Barham, it's Barham. The H is silent. I don't know how to.
It's Barham.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So Jayshawn, like, I've heard people, I don't want to be blasphemous here, but like compare him to like a taller Devin Bush. And if that's the case with this secondary, which, Rod goes down, that sucks. Like, I've got the Rod Moore, Jackson Smith and Jigba picture somewhere over here hung up because Rod is one of my favorite players. Yeah. And him going down just stinks because he's so damn good. But what Michigan did in the portal in April after the spring ball opening, with Wesley Walker, with Mangum from Michigan State, with Amir Hall, like, I think I'm missing the guy from UNLV. They did a great job of backfilling to try to find, maybe not one guy, but multiple guys to kind of work in there and try to replicate some of what Rod Moore could do. But, like, again, with this front four and in some of these younger guys that are coming up and are coming off the red shirt, freshman, sophomore season coming into this year, like, Jayshawn Barham has me very excited. Like, I don't know. It just sounds like all the things you hear from the program, and it kind of just goes along with what you've heard about other guys in the past that have broken out. Like, it seems like he's going to be for real. And then you pair him with Ernest Hausman, who was one of the better tacklers despite not starting a game for Michigan last year. Like, you've got a defense, man.
You do. I think it's kind of funny, the Devin Bush comparison. I feel like everyone uses that. I'm not even faulting you. It's just kind of I've just noticed it. Like, if you're fast, but I mean, that's part of what he is, right? He brings that to the table, speed, and same with Ernest Hausman, as you said. I mean, he was third on the team in tackles last year, despite playing, I think, the 14th most snaps on the defense. So, I mean, he was really productive when he was in there. And then to your point too about the defensive front, it's like, yeah, they may have to, like, Jair Hill may have to get up to speed a little bit, or some of those transfers coming in. But what helps the secondary is a great D line that gets to the quarterback. And Michigan's going to have that. And the interior pass rush might be as good as ever. It's something that, they really were trying to get for years and years and years. It felt like, until last year when they were able to get it. And then they would just bring those guys in waves. And next thing you know, Cam Good's running after a guy, and Chris Jenkins is back there, and Mason Graham is darting back there, and Kenneth Grant is just an absolute freak. So I think, again, less depth, but KG and Mason as juniors might be as good as anybody we've seen in terms of a duo.
Yeah, I mean, I think that The only thing, honestly, this is like champagne problems here. But the only thing that, honest to God, concerns me a little bit about the defense is that they're going to have to play 4 quarters this year. They didn't play 4 quarters for a single game until Ohio State last year, essentially, right? And so, to your point, Clayton, a little bit of lack of depth, and I say lack compared to last year. It's not,
Sure.
A true lack of depth. It's just not as good as one of the greatest defenses in Michigan history, which was 9 months ago, right? But when Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are in the rotation still in the 4th quarter against Texas, can they keep it going? So that's I don't even know if it's a concern. It's more of a question mark. I'm expecting that these guys who are freak athletes can go for 4 quarters. It's just something that we really didn't see until the last 3 games of the season last year, right? And so that's the thing I'm looking at. And then the other piece that you guys I don't think touched on was that the Jair Hill situation, right? At that cornerback 2 situation. You talked about backfilling some of those guys with Jaden Mangum and some of those transfers. But it looks to be that Jair is setting himself apart. So is he going to be ready week 2 though, with essentially like we're sitting here now on August 20th and he has 0 meaningful reps in his career in the college space, right? So all of a sudden you're going up against Quinn Ewers. How do you fare, right?
Well, in your like that's it, Quinn Ewers, right? Like a extremely experienced and talented quarterback who's won big games, including on the road,
right.
in his career. And, Michigan didn't really face guys like that last season, really at all until the playoff and even the big games at the end of the regular season. And we all remember Drew Aller on, what was it, 3rd or 4th down when he just kind of threw it to nobody. I mean, that was the quarterback play you got really till Talia Tagovailoa. And then, McCord kind of was what he was. I think he was okay. But and then even Jalen Milroe, they made that Alabama offense one-dimensional. So you're going to face better quarterbacks right away. You're going to face a Lincoln Riley offense, which we all know how good they've been historically, no matter who has been the quarterback or the personnel around that, quarterback. Jed Fish is a good offensive mind. They have some talent there at Washington. So it's going to be completely different. That kind of brings us to a broader point maybe of just like what this season in college football is going to be, because the matchups are crazy. Like, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I think, I'm a little younger, but I don't remember anything really but Michigan, Notre Dame, and then like the Washington game a couple years ago. Beyond that, the non-conference games have been kind of stale a little bit, other than again
through this
epic Notre Dame games. Yeah,
we went through this actually, to your point, Clayton. In our Blue by 90 group chat, it was the last top 10 matchup at home in Ann Arbor, I think, was like 1994. Non-conference was like 1994 or something like that.
I think it might have been 91 because so the way I did this, Clayton, I just literally went to like Michigan seasons and like Wikipedia and just went back and back and back and just looked at the schedule. Right. And it was like, there's gotta be an easier way to do that. We should look into that. But I don't know if that's how like ESPN stats guys are doing
this
it.
This is how we do our research here at Blue by 90.
Trust me, I'm not that far off either. Yeah, you got to do.
But yeah, to your point, I mean, it's gonna, the perception on what a successful season look like is going to change, right? Like, I mean, 100%. I don't necessarily think many teams are going to come out undefeated, especially in the Big Ten and SEC, right? Like you may have Clemson, or, if they get back on track, I don't know what they're looking like this year, but I'm sure they got some talent, or, Florida State or somebody in the ACC may come through undefeated, right? Because they're not playing. They didn't really, they added Stanford, Cal, and SMU, and then the Big 12, they brought in the Pac-12 leftovers aside from Oregon State and Washington State, RIP to the Pac-2 at some point. But so you may have a team, but the Big Ten SEC, like I just really don't think, even Georgia, I mean, the schedules are just absolutely loaded, especially for the top end teams, because that's where the viewership comes from, right? It comes from Michigan, Oregon, Michigan, USC, Ohio State, Oregon. It doesn't come from Rutgers, UCLA, right? So these lower tier teams are not going to have to face the better teams. So the better teams are all just going to cannibalize each other. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be insane, man. And yeah, I mean, this college football season probably going to be the best matchups that we've ever had, like in the regular season.
I agree. And also I just thought of this as you were talking, like everyone talks about, Michigan has to play Texas and USC, and Michigan has to go to Washington, and they're at Ohio State. Those teams have to play Michigan too. And Sharon Moore said that last week, but it's something I thought about more and more over the last few days, because you see people talk about the AP poll that came out last week, and it's all about these other teams, and everyone glosses over the defending national champions, and they're part of that too. Yeah.
Don't you love that? I think that's like,
I don't mind it. Yeah.
And I think, to be honest, hearing Sharon, hearing some of those guys, I think they love it too. I do think it's annoying. Right. Like, hey, somebody give us our props, a little bit. Like, we're pretty damn good. And, as much as we lost on the coaching staff and the offensive side of the ball, you bring back a lot of talent. Like, you still, to your point, like, they wouldn't do that. And again, it's our first national championship compared to an Alabama or something like that. But they're not saying that to Alabama or Georgia if they won the Natty last year, right? They're saying they reloaded and everyone's got to go there and play them again.
Yeah, Michigan was like kind of an outlier, like you were saying, in terms of winning the national championship. One, it was their first since '97, but two, they did it with lesser, blue chip talents, recruiting, whatever. But obviously they got the guys they wanted, the culture fits. But so I do understand it. There's been a lot of change, but I don't know. It feels like you're glossing over them a little bit. And then when people talk about, how that Texas game is, could define the beginning part of Michigan season, which I think it'll play a part in that. It's also like, well, Texas had one really good year. They made the playoff. This is kind of usually the game where they fall flat. And then everyone jokes about how Texas isn't back anymore. So are we kind of like, I don't know, maybe not us, but nobody's kind of realizing that that's a definite possibility also, going into
that game is like, right now it's a 3.5 point spread. I do feel like there are a lot of people out there that like media talking heads and just fans on Twitter or whatever that are acting like that's like a 9-point spread or something. Texas is this like unbelievable, obviously they have a couple injuries here at the running back position, which hurt them, which you hate to see that. But even beyond that, they lost plenty of talent as well. I know they have Quinn Ewers back and he's really, really good, but they lost talent, in their own right. And so and to your point, like, it's not like they're Bama. They haven't been to the college football playoff 10 years in a row or something like that, right? Like, they're
Michigan's been better. Yeah.
Seriously, Michigan has had a much better 3-year run. And I'm not just going to say it just because we have had a really good 3 years. But, like, if you look at the short, past, like, Michigan has been the better program over the past few years. So I think you have a good point of, like, there could be an argument for Texas has to go to Ann Arbor, right? And I'm not hearing that a lot in the media.
It's going to be electric. Like, that atmosphere is going to be crazy. But a lot of Texas fans, I would imagine. But, I mean, those games can get pretty well. I love those September games when the weather's nice and people are just kind of they're pumped that football's back. And, like, the Washington game, I know it was a night game in 21, was as good of an atmosphere as I've seen outside of, like, 2 Ohio State games, right, in my lifetime that were that electric. But it's going to be a really tough and raucous place to play.
But we've honestly, we've proved through the Ohio State games that you can get rocking at a noon game no matter what, right? True. And I think, like, we also haven't had a big time noon game in September when it's still 75 degrees, right? We're getting crazy for Ohio State, and my hands are falling off, right? So, like, I agree with you. It's gonna be rocking. So I want to talk. Okay. I also think, tell me, I know there are a lot of question marks on the offensive side of the ball. Tell me, based on what you have seen, heard from Sharon Moore, Kirk Campbell, the offensive line, Grant Newsome, tell me why they can't figure it out. Yes, they have to figure it out pretty quickly, and they have to, there's going to be a learning curve there. But, like, I think that people that are just discounting Sharon Moore's ability to develop the guys, and, the Grant Newsome, I think, doesn't get enough credit. Kirk Campbell is every single player I talk to loves Kirk Campbell in the passing game in the offensive side of the ball. So, like, that's where, for me, I'm sitting here, like, I'm going to bet on those guys. I think it's crazy for you to just write off that Michigan's offense is going to, have a huge fall off in 2024.
Yeah, and Sharon Moore said it recently where he said, as long as I'm here, we're going to be really good up front, something just like that. And that's kind of what you would figure, right? With the way he coached that offensive line. Nick Saban said last year that it was the best coach offensive line in the country. That's obviously saying a lot. So while they have to figure out all these different pieces and their identity, and even Kirk Campbell has talked about, we got to figure out what personnel grouping is our best. Last year it was 12 personnel. This year it could be 11 or 13, and they'll obviously bring out some of those heavy sets, but you got to figure out their identity. But something they can fall back on, I think, is that physicality that they play with. And those guys in the offensive line room have been there and have been practicing against these guys that are on the defensive side of the ball and competing with the guys that are now in the NFL. So you can fall back on the run game, the physicality, you kind of figure things out, I think, early on in the year, which bodes pretty well. And, I do think they have a little more firepower than a lot of people would give them credit for. I was talking to somebody who was just trying to gather some information on Michigan that was going to talk about it on a show nationally the other day, and they didn't know who Tyler Morris was. And
nobody knew who he was in the Rose Bowl either, and he outran the entire Bama defense.
Exactly. I'm not even blaming him for it because he had 13 catches last year. I mean, I guess the Rose Bowl one should clue you in, but it's just one of those things where they do have guys that have been waiting their turn and ready to go, like G.O.L. Hottie. A couple of weeks ago, he talked in front of the media and he said, someone asked him how he stayed so patient, and he said, "Yeah, I was really patient," and everyone just started laughing because it's so obvious that this dude could have started so many other places, and he's not the only one. But he turned down, really, it's tampering, it's against the rules, but it happens. He turned down offers from other schools to come there to stay at Michigan for this time, and you got to root for and bet on guys like that, in my opinion, over anybody else. It's like this dude's ready for his moment, and he's not alone.
Well, so the thing we kind of got away from this conversation, but I had looked it up while we were having this conversation, and Texas had 11 guys drafted last year in the 2024 NFL draft. And it's like, so they can replace talent, and it's like, when you talk about the offensive line, obviously Gio sounds like he's going to lock down a starting spot. Well-deserved. I mean, the guy started for Trevor Keegan in 2022 for multiple games when Keegan was out. You bring in Josh Preeb from Northwestern, who was all Big Ten last year. You have a returning starter in Miles Hinton, who I still think can be a high draft pick. Like, I think the measurables are all there. And if he, and he's even talked about, like, coming from Stanford to Michigan, like, it's, he's a 22, 23-year-old dude at this point. It's like, it still took him some time getting to Michigan to, like, transform his body, because Michigan does things a little bit differently than Stanford, right?
So, Gentry also are like two of the biggest human beings I've ever seen in my life.
Andrew Gentry at right tackle, or Jeff Percy, who started for Ryan Hayes back at Rutgers in 2022. See, Justin, I am a sicko. I know all this stuff for no reason, bro. And you've got Raheem Anderson or Greg Crippen at center. This team, they lost a lot of star power, but we heard that in 2021 going into 22. And obviously in 22 coming to 23, JJ's back, Blake's back, Dono's back. But you still heard that, right? Like, oh, Mike Morris is gone. This guy's gone, that guy's gone. And it's like, no, like, Michigan hasn't just been doing nothing and not recruiting studs. Like, they've got guys waiting in the wings at every position. Like, a guy like Zeke Berry, who's going to potentially be the starting nickel, was a top 100 recruit. He's in his redshirt sophomore year. Like, I don't understand why Michigan doesn't get the benefit of the doubt, considering they just won the national championship and have won 40 of 43 games and 3 straight Big Ten championships. I don't get it.
Keep doubting. I mean, the offensive line part cracks me up a little bit, because it's like, people will be like, well, Gio has no experience. No shit. He was behind Zach Zinter and Trevor Keegan, who are going to go down as two of the top offensive linemen in Michigan football history. It's like, sorry. Like, and actually, to your point, Clayton, like, I will give him a ton more credit for not just dipping 2 years ago.
Yes.
Which he could have done, right? Like, 2 years ago, he would have been starting at other Big Ten schools probably right away, and you could say the same thing about Kripp. You could say the same thing, Percy, Gentry,
Anderson.
And then I've heard Preeb is possibly the best offensive lineman on that whole squad. and nobody's even like blinking at him because he was on a really shitty Northwestern team last year. Like nobody even talking about him. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna say, like, I think this offensive side of the ball, and obviously we haven't even talked about the big discussion, which is the quarterback, but like I think that, to your point with Sharon Moore, of him saying, like, really, no matter what, we're going to be physical up front, and that's going to determine half of what this offense does, right?
It will, and I think that, in like, to touch on the quarterbacks a little bit, like that is something that's going to help those guys out too, because you have a couple experienced running backs, and it's weird to call Kalel Mullings that, but he's been around. He's a guy you can trust. And then Donovan Edwards, who I think is going to take a big step forward now that he's healthy. I think the injury last year that he was recovering from in the offseason was a big factor in some of his struggles, especially early on in the year. And then he gained some more confidence at the end. So you have guys around you. For those of us that play the NCAA college football video game, we know how much of a safety valve Colston Loveland is as well. He never drops a pass, and he's going to be a beast for them, in real life, most importantly this year too. So
so talking about Colston real quick.
Yeah.
It's funny because I'm going to talk about Colston, but use AJ Barner as the example, because I'm a sicko. I rewatched the Michigan Ohio State game yesterday, and
on Big Ten Network last night.
Yeah.
Same. And I called my aunt and uncle who are Michigan fans. They were also watching it. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I wish we had like a thing to see like who's also watching with you, because it's probably like half the fan base, just casually.
That'd be a great feature, actually.
Yeah. But there's a I can't remember exactly where it was in the game, but it was, I believe, late in the fourth quarter. And JJ, we're driving down the field, and there's a moment where everybody goes kind of deep. Like everybody on the outsides is 10 yards or deeper. And then AJ Barner literally takes one step, turns around, and JJ checks down to him, and he makes a little like weave up and goes up over 15 yards up the field. And I'm sitting there like, okay, that's not a hard throw to make. I think I could make that throw, right? But it's what they've done all year to like open it up and do all those things. And that's where I get excited about Alex Orji. And I'm not saying that because I don't think he can make other throws, but I'm saying that because it's the simplicity of what Kirk Campbell makes this offense for a quarterback. I think JJ, when he needed to make the throws on 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, he did. And he showcased that he could. But for the most part with this offense in 2023, what Kirk Campbell did, what Sharon Moore did, what Jim Harbaugh did is you make it simple enough where you just keep moving the ball down the field, right? And so you don't need Alex Orji to make unbelievable bombs that, we don't need him to be a Big 12 quarterback that's going to throw for 600 yards, right? Alan Bowman's going to go do that for us at 27 years of age, I
was just thinking that.
But, that's where like I've seen a lot of people like, well, if Alex Orji can figure out the passing situation, then Michigan will be really good. I don't think it has to be that he is like a 70% passer or something like that. The reality is like you actually go, I was talking to somebody about this today. You go back to Denard. Denard had an incredible completion percentage actually. And we all know he'd probably tell us like he wasn't the best passer. He's shoelaced for a reason, right? So like you can be creative without the quarterback needing to be perfect in the passing game. I went on a rant there, but that's kind of my point in what I'm saying.
It feels like Kirk Campbell's that type of guy that is going to get a little more creative. And I would imagine all offseason, without even knowing that Alex Orji was going to take the job, and let's see if he does, don't know one way or the other. But if he is, like, it's going to be a different offense than it was under JJ McCarthy. And I think he's probably prepared for that. So, and you can run actually some similar things to what they did with Denard, which would be kind of fun to watch. But, I agree. I think it's something though, those third and nines that you're talking about are really important, and you can look back at it, but I think it's like 3rd and 6 plus. JJ was like nearly 70%, 6 touchdowns, 600 yards or whatever. It wasn't, it didn't come around that often, but when it did, when it was 3rd and 10 and he had to fit one in a tight window to Roman Wilson against Ohio State in the first half, which is just as big as, a score late in the game in the grand scheme of things, he was able to do it. The ones at Michigan State, you didn't need those. You needed it if you wanted to cover like a 45-point alternate spread or something like that. But,
the ones versus Michigan State were the most wide open people I've ever seen.
Well, the one he whizzed by Cal Halliday's helmet
that one was incredible.
And then also the one that there was the offsides on, and he just let Colson go get it on the seam route. Honestly, some of those throws, like he had a throw on a 3rd and 14 to Barner where he's rolling right and like he just fits it in there. He finds Roman on a touchdown. He's rolling right. Like his ability to get outside of the pocket and make plays was so underrated.
Yes.
And so it's like can Alex Orji replicate that? Like a lot of the reports are he's feeling really comfortable inside the pocket, which is great. Like that's what we want to hear. But what happens when the play breaks down? And like, can you keep your eyes downfield and make the throw? But at the same time, Alex Orji is such a great athlete that he can probably go and get 6, 7, 8 yards, potentially setting up a 3rd and short or something. And I think, Justin, to your point too, like, and Clayton, you mentioned this as well, no Blake, right? So, Blake's not going to be churning out, 3 extra yards when he should have been 2nd and 8. But with Alex Orji being a runner and you put defenses in a bind, with Kalel, with Donovan, can you, keep it 3rd and short, right? Stay ahead of the chains, as everyone likes to say. It's cliche, but it's true, then keep a hold of the football too. That's a huge part of it.
I was just going to say, to add on to that, Michigan's offense was statistically one of the better offenses. Like the last 3 years, their offense was the difference. They're scoring high 30s or low 40s points per game, right? So, they end up cooking. But the reality is that they're not like throwing 4 60-yard touchdowns to do that, right? It's
one game.
The way that what's that?
One game they did, but
one game they did.
One bad half, Clayton. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's fair. That's fair.
But
you're right. You're right.
I feel like it was in a city in Ohio, but I can't remember.
Was it named after the guy that discovered America? Was that?
Yeah.
14.
We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it. It'll come to us. It'll come to us. But like the way that they won football games and the way this offense scored points is by, as you said, Tanner, not having negative plays, not having penalties, not fumbling the football, not throwing interceptions, not turning the ball over. Like they weren't ever I'm not going to say ever, but more often than not, they were making very routine plays, which they made look really easy. I'm not going to lie. Like they made hard plays look routine and they made routine plays look really easy, but they didn't make mistakes. And that's how they won football games. Going back to watching the Ohio State game from last year, you want to know how they won that football game? It was because we took over the ball with 9 minutes left and sucked the shit out of the clock for an 8-minute drive. And even though it ended in a field goal, that was probably, if you ask Jim Harbaugh and Sharon Moore, maybe one of their favorite drives of the year would be my guess, because you did exactly what you needed to do to keep the clock ticking. You got just enough for a first down. You didn't have any, which that is like one of the most crazy stats of all time. I believe we had like the perfect amount of yardage throughout the year, right, for first downs. Did you have that stat? Is that what you're nodding your head at?
No, I was just agreeing with you. But I do have a stat if you'd like to hear it, because I think this is hilarious.
Yes.
So last year, Michigan was 3rd, just talking to your point about playing disciplined football and penalties are a big indicator of that. They were 3rd in the country with 27.5 yards a game behind Minnesota, which shout out to PJ. He's got those boys disciplined. Number 1 was Air Force. And then in 2022, Michigan was 4th in the country behind Minnesota. Again, shout out PJ, Navy and Air Force, right? So like, to that point, I think the Michigan culture is really about minimizing penalties, minimizing mistakes, things that you can control, right? Like, yeah, you may get a bad call here or there, but like You know, if you're holding on the outside of the shoulder pads, yeah, you're going to get called. You're going to get dinged for it. And so for Michigan, making sure they don't get in those negative situations early on in a drive or early in downs, like that's a huge component to your point, Justin. And then they didn't fumble the ball. They didn't turn it over. Like they were so disciplined. If that can continue.
If you ask a real football coach how you win games, it's all those things that we're talking about right now. Right. And so anybody can, I don't want to keep going back to the sign stealing stuff, but you can talk about that all day. But if you ask somebody that's actually knowledgeable about football and a coach, the way that you win football games is you win the turnover battle. When I was playing ball, it was you're calculating your plus minus in the turnover battle every day. Right. Every game. And the higher that you are in that plus minus, the better chance that you have to win a football game. The statistics say it. Same thing with penalties. Same thing with, negative plays, all those things. So that's where, bringing it full circle back to it. That's why I do have a lot of positivity around this offense. I do have confidence in them because it's the same coaching staff, on the offensive side of the ball that's going to be running that. And although, you're obviously losing a lot of key pieces, I think that they're not going to try to win games, by just like going crazy, Big 12 football, Air Force football, whatever. They're going to do the exact same thing and just churn out first down after first down until they punch it in.
And another word to go along with what you guys are talking about is poise, where it was – and I think this bodes well if it is Alex Orji as the quarterback. Every time he came in, which is kind of a weird spot, right, to come in for like 2 plays in these big moments, really. I mean, he had to kind of spark them beginning of the second half after the offense was a little stagnant at the end of the first half against Ohio State. And then against Washington, he had a nice run as well. And he came in, the motions were always on point. The timing was good. There were no delay of games. There was no, he looked confident. It felt like he had everyone in the right spot. And, but one of the big things that the first team offense did, or, what JJ did, was to get him in the right play as well. Part of that in college is looking over to the sideline, but, sometimes there's not time. And, there were some big sequences when you see JJ making a call at the lines, things like that. So that's really important. It comes with a lot of experience. But it does feel like those guys that are there, do have some of that experience doing that. And Orji, in particular, just because we saw him a little more in the bigger moments, not in garbage time, it seems to have that, type of DNA. And he's been around. He watched JJ, emulated him for a while. So I think that is a positive for Michigan. Also, too, like to go back to what I just said about experience, Kirk Campbell brought this up as well, that he's like, we have guys that have started. Like Tyler Morris and Samaj would have been starters if we were in, a 3 wide receiver set last year. We just happened to play AJ Barner a lot, but they played big time snaps. Michigan has 10 guys on the offense that have started games in the past. They total about, I think it's 109 starts total. A lot of those are Miles Hinton, Josh Preed, but a lot of them are also some of the other guys like Tyler Morris and Samaj Morgan. Colston Loveland has several of those, but there are guys that have played a lot. So hopefully if you're Michigan, they've picked up from, the way Blake Corum operated and JJ McCarthy did, the Drake Nugent making the calls at the line, and that they can now step in and do those things.
Yeah, and I think 2 guys, too, that we haven't mentioned yet on each side of the ball. Max Bredesen, who is going to be a captain.
He's my favorite player.
Yeah, he's going to be a captain. And then also on the back end of the defense, Makari Page, right? So those are 2 guys that go to Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Days, probably 2 captains.
Which it's kind of funny that they're the last 2 people that we, if you want to talk about Michigan not being talented, but then you don't mention 2 of their captains, like they probably have some pretty good talent.
It's a great point. Right?
Yeah. And then also, Clayton, I wanted to add on to your point about Orji coming in. I think we all knew at some point Michigan was going to pull something with the Orji Cat offense where he was going to throw it, right? And so it comes in the Rose Bowl. You know what he doesn't do when that play's covered? Chuck it up, right? He tucks the ball away and he gets 2 yards. It's those things that have me excited about his potential. And it's the athleticism, it's the big arm. I mean, this is a kid that played high school football in Texas. Justin, we were just talking about it before the show, like Texas high school football is so different from anywhere else in the country. It's so big time. And so this is obviously it's not the same as playing in front of 110,000 against your home state school in the big house, but like a guy who's coming into his 3rd year, he's played in a lot of games. You feel a little bit more confident with a first-time starter because of the amount of snaps that he's gotten over the last, year and a half, 2 years with Michigan, and what his background is, and the offense that's in place. To go back to the Alabama game, and Justin, I'll let you hop in here real quick. I thought Sharon's game plan for the Rose Bowl was impeccable. I mean, how many plays did Michigan miss? Like, they played sloppy, but that offensive game plan was impressive. And so if that's what Sharon's going to be.
Well, going back to the motions, didn't they motion on like almost every single play in that game?
Dude, Alabama didn't know what to do.
Yeah, they had no idea. Like, I trust in Sharon Moore and Kirk Campbell and Grant Newsome to outsmart almost anybody on the defensive side of the ball that's going up against us, right? And so what I was going to say going back to Orji is like, the one thing, everyone's like, oh, can he pass the ball? Can he do this? Can he do that? Like, have you seen him turn on the burners? That shit, like in the Ohio State game, I mean, he's like a split second from being gone. And so, I know obviously we need to, he'll need to figure out the passing situation. And, we're hoping that he does. But like, even if that passing situation is average, like him just being the running threat that he is, like that is a legitimate threat every single play. So I don't know that there is another quarterback in the country that if you're a defensive coordinator, you're like, I don't want a game plan for that guy, right? Like, because A, you don't even fully know what you're getting with him because you haven't seen it on film yet. But B, it's like there's a chance that when you guys are talking about scrambling, when we're talking about really creative design runs and different reverses with Tyler Morris and Donovan Edwards in the backfield, then split out, then, they can do a ton of different things. Like, I think there are going to be a lot of defensive coordinators that are sitting there looking at Alex Orji and Donovan Edwards and the rest of the crew in the backfield and saying, this is not easy to game plan against right now.
Yeah. And it kind of reminds me of, because the play's never dead, right? When he's got the ball in his hands, it's going to be similar to Jalen Milroe last year. Like, he didn't throw very well against Michigan. They had an unbelievable game plan. And then, under Jesse Minter and brought all that, got all that pressure without even blitzing sometimes. But you always were holding your breath until the whistle blew because you knew what he could do. And even, late in the game, he had some runs that were really important for them. Obviously didn't get the one that really mattered, but the same thing could be true about Alex Orji. And I remember Don Brown, not to bring up Don Brown, but I just did, before the Orange Bowl against Florida State. And he said, when Dalvin Cook has the ball in his hands as a D coordinator, you're holding your breath the entire time. So that's to your point, Justin, where it's like, it's going to be the same thing when you have Orji in the game, whether he's a starter or whether he's somebody who just plays a lot of snaps off the bench or he rotates with somebody. Like, when 10's in the game, it's going to be, kind of a problem, even if he can't, be JJ McCarthy in the throw game. And
he doesn't, I think, okay, this is my last point on him. And he doesn't have to be JJ McCarthy. I think that's my whole point of like, everyone wants him. Listen, if he's JJ McCarthy, we on this podcast will be more than thrilled. Trust me, you're rocking the JJ Vikings jersey right now. But like, JJ statistically is one of the best, the winningest quarterback in Michigan football history, in college football history, right? Like, he's up there. So I don't, I'm not saying, that's, I think, my whole point of like, for Michigan to be 10-2, 11-1, possibly 12-0, he doesn't need to be JJ. He just needs to be Alex Orji, not make mistakes, be dynamic in the way that he runs the offense and can attack a defense. And then Michigan's going to win a lot of football games.
They are, man. And, I think, and Clayton, you can let me know what you've heard, or if you don't want to divulge that on the pod, that's fine too. But like, I just feel like for me, I've been a Michigan fan way longer than I've been, doing any of this podcast stuff or whatever. So like, I still read, I read On3, I read 247, I read Rivals, man. I read it all. Like, I want Michigan football content. I'm starved for it from, January to August, man. And it just feels like, and we love Davis Warren. Davis Warren is our guy. He said he'd be in the foxhole with us. Like, Davis Warren is a stud. But
let me add on to that before you make your point. Okay. If Davis Warren wins the job, we will be the biggest Davis Warren guys.
100%. 100%. Jack Tuttle would win it, or if Jaden Denigal or Jaden Davis, I'm riding with whoever
100%.
Michigan's quarterback is, and I want those other 4 guys to be successful. But it just the vibe to me is that it's going to be Alex Orji. Like, everything you read is that he is separating himself. Tuttle's got, I've read that Tuttle might have, a lingering issue or something, working through something, as Jim Harbaugh would say. It just feels like it's going to be Orji. And, that's an unknown, right? And it's the same with all these other positions where it's like, oh, well, they don't have anybody coming back. And it's like, well, it's unknown. They could be great. They could not be great. But the potential for Alex Orji should have Michigan fans extremely excited, because he can sling it. And if he can, again, just command that huddle, to your point, Clayton. I mean, being a quarterback, Jake Butt talked about this. Like, it's about commanding the respect of your team, commanding the huddle, owning the playbook. But man, if it all comes together, this kid, the sky's the limit for him. I mean, he's a freak athlete. I mean, we've seen the windmill dunk, between the legs stuff, like crazy athlete. In the Michigan State game, dude, when we were there, Justin, he broke off a run. He went down and then he did a somersault for no reason. And he just got up. And I was like, okay, relax. Just showing off now.
They just kept running the same play over and over for him too.
It's just ran cute quarterback power and 8 seconds left. And just, by the way, if anybody wants a good laugh, you go watch the Michigan State highlights from last year. It's a good watch. But when Orji scores, it cuts to the sideline and JJ and Donovan are going crazy. But if you look, Sharon is saying something across the field to some people about 53 yards away from him and letting them know. And that just, it gets me fired up, man, because Sharon's our guy. And I'm pumped for this season, man. Like, I think this team could be really special again, even with all the guys they lost.
I never noticed that. I will have to watch that, but I think they were pissed that the Michigan State committed a personal foul right before that. I talked to Orji about that. I was like, how great was it just to put the exclamation point on that game? Or maybe it was like the 5th or 6th exclamation point, because it was not even close. But he said, well, once they committed that penalty, he knew they had to get in. And so that was pretty sweet. And it's like one of those moments that we'll look back on, right? If to go along with what you're saying, Orji, if it works out and he's a quarterback and he ends up being pretty good this year at the very least, then he's a redshirt sophomore. Like, his skill set maybe isn't necessarily the NFL type. Like, I think you'd really have to groom him, and eventually down the road he could be. So if he stays 5 years, you're looking at potentially 3 years with him. I'm getting way ahead of myself, but a moment like that at Michigan State is going to be one of those things you look back on. It's like when, not quite to that, but to what Denard's first run was, but just stuff like that. So I think that Alex Orji, if he's the guy, you have 3 years potentially with him, at least 2. And that's really exciting, given that he seems to have a pretty high upside and he can improve as he goes along. He's not just going to be the same guy Fresno State as he will be at Ohio State, and he won't be the same guy this year as he will be in the future.
Well, and I think to your point with that, we all watched Jalen Milroe, who we're comparing Alex Orji to, and a lot of people are. We watched him early against Texas, actually, which is kind of ironic too. And he struggled a lot really early. But if you remember, a lot of people discount that Alabama offense because of what Michigan did to them in the Rose Bowl. The week before, or the couple weeks before, they dominated Georgia, who had the best defense of all year in the entire country, right? And so Jalen Milroe, but to your point, he figured that out throughout the year. It took him a while because he was just as inexperienced as Alex Orji is sitting right now. But you absolutely are. Like, I don't think you can sit there and, we're all going to be the Monday morning quarterback on, Sunday after Fresno State and be like, all right, this is either going to work or it isn't, right? We're either going to go way one way or way the other, because that's how, fans work and media works these days. But you're going to have to give him time. If, again, we're speaking as if he's going to be the starting quarterback, but you can look at Jalen Milroe and what he did last year from game 1 to game 12 and 13, right, and 14, to see, okay, he developed a lot, and Alex Orji can do the exact same thing.
Let me just say this too, I guess, because I agree, Justin. It's going to improve throughout the year. And part of what Alabama did last season was Tommy Rees, their offensive coordinator, once they fully committed after they benched Milroe early in the year, which did happen, right? You can't forget that. They went all in on building the offense around him. And I think Michigan, as the year progresses, if Orji's the guy, is going to go all in on building it around him. And game experience will help with that. What works, what doesn't. So you got to trust Kirk Campbell, I think, in that sense.
I think this coaching staff too is not going to be one to put a square peg in a round hole. I mean, we've seen that unfortunately in Michigan. With Rich Rodriguez, like, hey man, the zone read is not going to work with Nick Sheridan or Stephen 3, right? And then with more success with Brady Hoke in year one, but like, why are we putting Denard under center, right? Like, you don't need to go shotgun all the time, right? But like, let's play to his strengths. So I think. I just feel like this is going to happen. Like, with Kirk Campbell, Sharon, all Grant Newsome coaching the O-line, Ron Bellamy coaching the wide receivers, like Steve Cazzulo with the tight ends. Like, they're going to be, they're going to be in cohesion with regards to what the offense is going to look like for Orji if it is him, and they're going to play to everyone's strengths, right? Like, we're not going to try to go 5 wide, right? Like, that's not Michigan at all, but that's not anything that they're going to end up trying to do, right? Like, it's going to be a lot of 12 personnel. Maybe some 22 personnel with Donovan and Khalil on the field at the same time, right? Like, there's gonna be a lot of different things that you try and do. So I'm very excited for this offense, man. I think there's a lot of potential, and people are sleeping on Michigan, and that defense is going to carry them a lot of wins. And that's the thing; they don't necessarily need to put up 40 points a game. I'd love for them to, but the defense is going to be so good that it's going to keep them in every single ball game.
Yeah. Agreed. So Clayton, I'll end it with this segment here. We've talked about it a little bit, but when you're talking to these coaches at the pressers, when you're listening to them, when you're listening to the players, what is the culture that you're hearing, and how do you think that will impact what we see as a product on the field this year?
That is a great question. And it's something that I think is probably overlooked because it's not on Phil Steele, right? It's not about how many starters you have coming back, and that stuff's important, but you can't put that down on paper. And Wesley Walker, who came in as a 6-year senior, he's played for 3 different head coaches in college football. He was at Louisville this spring. He was at Tennessee the 2 years before that, and then started at Georgia Tech prior to that. And I asked him, how does Sharon Moore compare in terms of the way he runs the program, runs practice? And he said, this is the smoothest that I've seen out of these head coaches. And his other 3 head coaches combined to have 19 years of head coaching experience. Sharon Moore has 4 games worth plus, part of an offseason, right? So that to me is really telling. And then he was also asked about the culture. What's different between this and any other team you've been on? And he said, it feels like a real team here. He said, there's this vibe where everyone's tight knit, close together. They care about each other. They play for each other. There's good communication that translates onto the field as well. So I think that's the first thing that comes to mind for me, because we talked to him a few days ago, and to hear the contrast between, I've been places, right? He was at Tennessee when they won 10 games. They knocked off Alabama, I believe, that season. But, there's just a difference between maybe what Michigan has done and what Michigan is, and some of those other programs that are doing a good job. Louisville's doing a fine job under Jeff Brown, but it's not quite to Michigan's level, and that encourages you, I think, going into the Sharon Moore era.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to still be seen, right? We haven't seen Sharon Moore as it is with it being his program, and so you have a whole new defensive staff. Although it's the same defense, obviously we know that part. You have a new QB and a ton of new faces on the offensive side of the ball. And then you have a new head coach with a new, he's doing things a lot like Jim Harbaugh. You can see the Harbaughisms come out, maybe not in the way he speaks, but in the way he runs things and the different, things that he emphasizes. But it's still going to be all new. So 2024 Michigan football, it'll be something to watch, whether it be good or bad. For sure, it's going to be must-see TV, especially just knowing that all the haters are hate watching no matter what. For sure. So, Clayton, appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you.
Tell the people where they can follow you at.
Yeah, just go to thewolverine.com and check us out over there. So got a bunch of content coming. We got, message board. People are fired up. The people are hate watching. People are also on the Michigan side of things. They're fired up, posting, and they got their theories on this, theories on that about who's going to do what. So it's that time of year when the possibilities are endless.
Love it. All right. Appreciate you, man. We, hopefully we'll have you on throughout the season as well. And Clayton does great stuff over at the Wolverine with the podcast with our other friend, Anthony Broom. And, at your Twitter, love your tweets, love your articles, all that stuff. So go follow Clayton. We appreciate you, man. For us, you can follow us at Blue by 90 on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Blue by 90 Podcast on YouTube, and blueby90.com. We appreciate you. Go Blue.
Go Blue. At the same time.